Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to be making an enclosure for my Bambu A1 3D printer. Roll the intro. So fellow woodworkers, as you all know for some recent videos, I have got a Bambu Labs A1 printer, and it's a great printer. As you'll see in my review that I did earlier, and I'll put a link in the description, this is a really lovely piece of kit, but as you can see, it's yet to find a proper home. So this week I want to create a cabinet to put this printer in, but this is going to be my first ever piece of furniture that is actually going to live in my house. So I'm going about this the proper way. Let's have a look at my design. Hello fellow woodworkers, it's Future Roger here. Just to let you know that I've decided to split this video into two separate sections. When I did the first cut edit, it was over an hour long, so I didn't want to cut all that stuff out and squish it down to a small video. So part 2 will be coming up in 2 weeks' time. So fellow woodworkers, as you can see, I've made a plan, and on these two sides, these are the two sides. There's the sides on the other side. These sides are actually going to be hinged, which is why they're split into two. These two front doors are actually going to be connected so that it forms like an L shape, and when you open the side it will be able to sort of collapse back. I've also done the same at the top, so this piece batten of wood here is going to be hinged to this piece of wood, so you'll be able to sort of lift the top up without losing the rigidity of the sides, because basically this bit is going to attach to these bits, and that's going to keep it nice and structurally sound apart from the actual back of the unit. Here there's a shelf, and underneath I'm going to have some storage space. I've measured this to be just big enough to fit in spools of printer filament, and it's deep enough that I should be able to get, if my calculations are correct, I should be able to store 8 full-size spools of printer filament in there. As I said, these front doors, they will be either handled or latched. What I am going to do potentially is put a decorative panel on the inside here. I've got some left over from when I made some radiator covers. So all in all, a pretty straightforward design. Now, using SketchUp, I have also made a cut list which comes with SketchUp. The only thing about this is unfortunately it is spread over two full-size sheets of plywood, and at the moment, at the time of filming this video, plywood in the UK is about 45 pounds for a sheet. So this is going to require 2 sheets. But as you can see, this whole bit here, there is a lot of wastage here. But the way that it works, the cut list part of the SketchUp program, is it sort of puts things together as much as possible. It knows you're going to need another sheet here, so it automatically spills it on. But what I can do, there's only 4 panels on this second sheet. I can get at least one of these panels on this sheet, which means I've only got to find enough wood to make these 3 panels. So I'm going to have a look in my plywood pile now, because I think I've got enough. The other thing is, as this is all going to be painted, it doesn't really matter if I've got a sort of a mixture of different plywoods. I know I've got soft plywood and hard plywood, and most of this project is planned to be harder plywood, but if I've got softer plywood, then I have no qualms about putting that as the front doors or joining it up on the front doors, because as I said, it's all going to be painted and you won't see it. So that's the plan, that's the cut list. Let's have a look at the wood we've got. Sadly, I didn't have enough wood in my scrap wood pile, enough wood of good enough quality, so I made a trip to my local big box store in the UK, B&Q, to get a piece of MDF cut down. You've often heard me moan on this channel about how expensive wood is, and it is still ridiculously expensive, but I have to say this was on sale, and this full sheet which is 1220 mil by 2240 mil, was actually reduced. It was sort of on sale down to £30, which is a lot less. Now, I handed the cut list over to the guy. I wanted to talk him through it, but he was keen to do it on his own, and as you'll see later in the video, that comes back to bite me. So when I got home, I unloaded all the wood, and it's probably not obvious to see on here, but it was at this point that I noticed that one of the corners of the MDF had been cut off. It hadn't been dinked, because I really carefully checked that piece of wood before I gave it to him for cutting. It must have happened when he was cutting it off. It was almost like a bit of the edge had been completely shaved off, which was one of many problems that presented itself during this part of the build. So, fellow woodworkers, as you can see, I've opted for MDF for this job. Two reasons, really. Number one, I don't use MDF very often. I'm very much more usually a plywood type of person. But number two, as this is going in the house, I think MDF has a sort of cleaner look. It's easier to paint, and I think you get a much nicer overall end product. It is more tricky to use than plywood, I think, particularly if you're going to use pocket holes, which is what I think we're going to use for this build. That and possibly a combination of my biscuit joiner. But hopefully you've just seen a clip of video of the wood being cut up in B&Q. I went in to the shop, I gave the guy the cut list, and I started talking him through what I wanted, and he said, no, just give it to me, I'll do it. So he took the cut list off me and off he went, cutting everything up. So I think I've got all the pieces in this ginormous MDF jigsaw, but the next thing for me to do is actually make sure I've got what I need. So for that, I'm just going to lay everything out, get some trusty blue masking tape, and I'm just going to label everything, and let's see how many pieces I'm missing, if any, and then we can check the measurements. This was actually really quite difficult. When you watch it, it looks pretty straightforward, but measuring and double measuring and triple measuring the wood did take quite a long time, and I really wasn't sure when I just held the wood up against each other. I just really wasn't sure that some of these pieces were right, and as you can see, you know, I've pulled bits of tape off, I've re-put them on, I've checked and double checked again, because some of this wood just did not seem to be the right length. There wasn't the same amount of duplicate pieces that are the same size that there should have been either. So by the end, I was a little bit confused, I have to say. So, fellow woodworkers, I should have said at the beginning of this clip, I'm using a new camera and microphone combination. So hopefully you're seeing this video and it's working okay. Now, you will have seen the incredibly long and dull time lapse of me trying to marry up my cut lists with the actual wood that I was cut. So when I went into B&Q, I bought one complete full sheet of 18mm MDF, which cost me £40. My cut list is actually designed for 2 sheets. So on this sheet, it literally only uses probably not even a third of a new sheet. And obviously, because I'd set SketchUp to configure based around whole sheets, I thought that'll be no problem. I'll just buy a smaller sheet when I'm in there. When I got into B&Q, there was a full-size sheet that was sort of missing a third, I suppose is the best way to say, and it was only £10, and it was a really good bargain. So I said to the guy, well, I'll take that one as well, will you cut it up? So what he's done, these pieces are correct. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got 6 pieces that are absolutely spot on, millimetre by millimetre, to what's on my cut list. However, these sections, which are the sort of folding door sections, are not correct. So this bit here is supposed to be 103 by 103.8 by 27.8. So it's actually 102, this one, which does match. So if this is the longer one, which I'm presuming it is, it's meant to be 103.8. Well, it's 103.7. That's not the end of the world. But it's meant to be by 27.8. And it's actually by 23. So what I think he's done is mix up the measurements from these two door sections. The longer one should have been wider. So what he's done is cut a longer one narrower than he should have done, because the two missing door sections that I should have are, this one is 102, which is exactly correct, but it should be 23.8, and it's actually 27.8. So this one is wrong, but the biggest problem is this one that he's cut too short. Now, luckily, I have got some leftovers from that piece of wood. I've got enough that I can do what I need to do, but it's just a bit frustrating really, because that's a sort of small mistake to make, and perhaps if he'd have let me interact with him a bit more, wouldn't have made that error. So the good thing is the bits I've got cut are absolutely perfect. They are literally a millimetre by millimetre in, so I'm not going to have to do any cutting or edging up or anything like that. But what I am going to have to do is trim these two bits to the right length and cut two completely new pieces that are like this, that are the wrong width, which is slightly frustrating. So let's get on and do that now. So I got the tape measure out and I measured it really, really carefully, because obviously these are sort of leftover or cut pieces of wood. So I didn't want to make any mistakes with them. And also I did discover that there was a way I could correct this a little bit more simply than I just explained to you, because I just slightly changed the dimensions, which just left me with a bit of an overhang, but I can live with that, no problem. So I was very careful how I measured and cut this. As you can see, I have a little bit of an issue with my plunge saw here. You'll see in a minute, this first cut, there was like a little bit of burning of the MDF. It's been quite a while since I've cut MDF. As I said at the beginning, most of my work recently has all been done in plywood, but I did get a super straight cut, and this large bit that you can see me cutting now is because what is going to be the sort of lid of the cabinet was actually overcut in terms of size as well. That hadn't been cut properly. For some reason it was quite a long way over, so I'm just readjusting the spare piece of wood I had to make those cuts to make that bit a bit better. But the other thing about this is the quality of the cuts that came off of the saw, the plunge saw at B&Q, are absolutely brilliant. Off camera I was just curious to see how accurate the cuts were, and I put my Wolfcraft square up, and every single one was 100% spot on. And I don't know what your opinion is of you know, the quality of cuts and the sort of factory edges of pieces of wood, but every single cut from that saw in B&Q was absolutely 100% bang on straight, which you can't really ask more than that. And especially for a unit that's going in my house that I'm going to have to look at every day, I wanted to make sure 100% that it was exactly as I wanted it to be. So dead straight, looking good everywhere, and obviously that starts with the original cabinet and making sure that all the edges are straight and it's been cut properly. So really pleased with the overall cuts, not so pleased with the fact there were quite a few mistakes. Okay, so I'm pleased to say that those cuts, those trims I've done, are now exactly the right size. So all of my pieces are exactly the size that I need them to be. Now they are all going to be painted, but what I'm going to do now is just do a sort of dry fit, and let's just check everything's as it should be. So I really took my time painting this wood. I had some primers, some sort of undercoat, and all of the paint I use is Leyland, only because it's just a brand that I've got used to and got familiar with. And every single thing got 2 coats of sort of primer. Here you can see I'm using a foam roller, which, to be honest with you, wasn't great because it looks very blotchy, and I switched to a cloth roller in the end. But all of these pieces of wood had 2 coats of undercoat or primer. They all got knocked back, and then I put on 3 coats of Leyland white gloss specific for wood. So by the end, they looked really nice. Now, having said that, there are still some bits that I will need to go back and just touch up a little bit, because on a couple of pieces, you can almost sort of see a brush, not a brush, you can almost sort of see a roller mark. But I really did take my time doing this because I wanted to make sure it was absolutely perfect, knowing, of course, that it was going in my house. I was going to have to look at it every single day. So I wanted to make sure I got it as spot on as possible, which thankfully I was happy with the end result. Okay, so it's been a few days since the last bit of footage you've seen, and I've finally finished painting everything alongside all the other projects that I've got running at the moment. So I'm now going to start the joinery of putting the actual unit together. Now, I'm going to say straight off, what you're going to see me do here is not my own idea. I got it from Average Joe's Joinery. I'll put a link to his video in the description for this video. I don't really know the channel. I just did a Google search for joining MDF because I wanted to try something different, and Average Joe's video came up. It's absolutely brilliant, great style. If you don't know his channel, pop on, have a look, maybe subscribe, up to you. But basically, he is using a router bit like this. It's a slot cutting bit, and I'll put the dimensions of it on, but basically it's got a 6.3 mil sort of cutting head, so it's designed specifically really for 18 mil pieces of MDF, which is obviously what the unit's made out of. So to set it up, you literally just, I mean, I've eyeballed it, which is what Average Joe did in his video. But essentially, I've leveled it up. Let me get that on there. Hopefully, you can see that. So I've leveled it up so that the slot is exactly in the middle of the piece of wood. So what it will do is cut a slot in the middle. This is just a test piece, so it will cut a slot in the middle, and then you cut a corresponding slot in the piece of wood that you're attaching it to. So for this purpose, I'm going to cut this piece of wood in half, and I'll cut a slot here, and I'll also prop it up and cut a slot in here. This is just a test piece to see if it works, because it's a new technique. I've not used it before. If it works, fantastic. I'll use it for the joinery, and if it doesn't, I can always fall back to using pocket holes. But let's get this cut in half and let's try it out. So I was really interested to try this technique and to see if it worked, because A, it's always good to have a new way of doing something, and B, it's such a simple thing to do this. It really, really is simple. So you'll see at the end what the results were. So as you can see, it's a super simple setup. It's really, really easy. What you can't see is I just put a mark on the top so I knew where to start with the router bit, but really, really straightforward. Apart from covering the camera in sawdust, it did exactly what I expected. Okay, so you probably can't see this because I just covered the entire camera in dust cutting it out, but let me just show you closer. You can hopefully see how well that has cut out. It's pretty much exactly in the middle, but it's a really nice hole. So this piece has worked, but obviously I've now got to make the same cut on the other side. And the good thing is, whichever way round, if it is slightly out and it's not exactly 100% level, it doesn't really matter, because when I make the cut on the other piece of wood, all I've got to do is make sure that I position the other piece of wood the correct way round, and it will line up even if one of these edges is slightly thicker. And as Average Joe says in his video, this one at the bottom actually perhaps is tiny, like a millimetre lower, although it is generally in line with the line I marked. But irrespective of that, you still get the option of turning it around. So let's hook this up and try the second bit. So exactly the same process here. Obviously this piece of wood I've just clamped and I'm not cutting into the edge, I'm cutting alongside. Again, I put the pencil marks to see where to put the router bit in and out. I do come back, you'll see I just come back on the cut because I'd started a little bit sort of too deep, if you see what I mean. Okay, so basically I now have this piece, which is the sort of bottom section. As you can see, it's got a slightly thinner top, and I've got the cut of the other piece, and hopefully you can see at the bottom there's a slightly thinner cut. So all I've got is some 6mm MDF, and I'm just going to rest this in this slot. It's a tight fit. There's not much play in it at all, but it's not ridiculously tight. But 6mm ply is exactly right. It says that the slot cutter is 6.3mm, but I haven't really got a lot of space in there. So if it all has gone to plan, this bit should now just sit on here. I'm going to line up the thinner edges. Let's see. Okay, so it is sat there, but the slot is not sitting 100% level. I think it's because this isn't level. So let me level that off a little bit and let me try it again, because I don't actually think the hole I've cut on this bit. So as you can see, it has fit. There's a slight edge this side, and there's a little bit of play in it. I think the slight edge is because this piece of wood that I've cut is perhaps marginally too wide. I think if I put it in there, it's going to go over halfway. It is. I just put a little line on it. I'm not sure if you can see that there. So I think this piece of wood is just a tiny bit too big. I just randomly made this 20 centimeters wide, which is probably a little bit too thick. So what I'm going to do is just quickly cut another bit, and let's see if that works. Okay, so I've just cut another piece just to keep it all regulation. I've cut it to 18mm, which might have been what Average Joe said in his. I can't remember what it was. So I'm going to try it again. So here's the slot, and I'm going to seat it in. It's properly seated. It's not going up in either way. And let's try this piece on the top and see if it now sits flush, which I am very pleased to say it does sit flush. There is a little bit of movement in it, but to be honest with you, when it's all glued up, I don't think I'm going to get that. What I am going to do though is just glue this model together just to make sure. And the other thing is, when I actually do this, I think I might just put a sort of one maybe pocket hole just in the back. But now that I know I'm all good to go, I can start putting all the joins in for the cabinet and start constructing it. But for a really, really effective way of doing it, I'm really pleased with that. I could have put it in my router table, and that was something that I considered doing. I just think with a palm router, you've got a little bit more control and finessing up and down. But let's get this glued up now, and I'll just check it's all right. So I glued it together. Mental note, used far too much wood glue here. So I glued it together, and it was really, really tight after half an hour. It wasn't sort of moving anywhere, so I was confident enough to move on to the bigger sheets. And I also made the decision to use the router table, because you pay all that money for a router table, you should use it. Okay, so I've decided to set up the router table to make these cuts. Now, there's not a lot of point in having a router table if you don't use it, and I'm a bit worried about my hand wobbling or something going on with the palm router. So what I've done is I've just set this table up with an entry point So when I push the wood in there, it will go along, and then I'll pull it out when the end of the wood gets to that entry point. The only disadvantage is I couldn't find a way of doing this up with the cover that was there, and actually the cover that's there has only got a 20mm sort of aperture hole, and that is nowhere near big enough. I need to get a better filler for this, you know, with a wider aperture, just so I can sort of get it in. But it's all set up and ready to go. I've done a test piece and it works. Let's see how it goes with the actual pieces of wood. So as you can see, I just put some marks in, and I went ahead and cut the two sort of side pieces of the door. It was really nerve-wracking, I'm not going to lie. I didn't want to ruin it and waste all that hard work of the cutting, the painting, etc. But I'm pleased to say it produced a really nice cut, slightly shorter than I wanted it to be. So I just put it back in and extended it a tiny little bit. I think there was just a little bit of hesitance or nervousness really about making a sort of mistake. So I put it back in, got it exactly the same length. I did the same for both of the sort of downward side pieces. You can see the second one there, and obviously these will need to be, well, at the time I thought they needed to be top and bottom, which is what I did, but I decided against using the top part, which you'll see in the second part of the video what happened there. With that done, it was then a case of trying the big piece. I was very, very nervous with this, I'm not going to lie. I was really concerned about how it would go, but having offered it up and put it in one side, it went through really, really well. It was quite clean. There's a little bit of chip out, which you'll see in a minute, but overall I was very pleased. But of course the difficulty is I hadn't marked up where it needed to be to go the other way, because both cuts need to be sort of on that same edge. So midway through, I just offered up the piece of wood to sort of adjust the cutting point, so I knew exactly where it had to be, which I was very careful to do. You can just see, probably just saw there a little bit of chip out on one side just where the paint's chipped off. I was very careful, got it to exactly where I wanted it to be, and I just made 2 pencil marks on the guide, the fence guide for the router table there, just to sort of make sure I didn't overdo it, because obviously what you can't do here is make a mistake that's going to affect everything, because like I said, the wood's expensive. I don't want to ruin it and go back over it again. But when I'd marked it, I was confident I had everything in the right place, and I just ran those 2 pieces through, and thankfully it did turn out exactly as I wanted it to. In fact, it was spot on. Not easy to do this, but I'm really pleased. And before anyone says, there was loads of room between my fingers and the router. My hand is actually above, before I get flamed in the comments for doing this in a dangerous way. I was nowhere near the router bit at any point, I promise you. Okay, so I've just been outside and cut, as you will have seen in that piece of footage, and I've just got another one of those little joiners here. What I am going to say, the quality of the cut on the router table, as I was pulling it away, I'd made the same mistake on both ends. I'll try and give you a close-up of it, but I've just notched out a little piece of the MDF, and it's exactly the same place on both sides. And actually, one of these cuts isn't very good at all. It was the one when I was trying to work it out going backwards. The good thing is that will all be lost here, because when I put this in, that whole thing will be covered up. So I'm going to glue it up now. I've just made a little spacer, just tested there that it fitted in, which it does. So I'm going to glue this exactly what you saw in the test piece, and then fingers crossed it's going to hold. I am going to say one thing though, I'm very happy to do these two using this method of joinery, but the back panel I am going to put pocket holes in it, because as good as this is, it's not going to be strong enough to do the two. So I've tried this piece of joinery out, but to be honest with you, it is quite a lot of hassle. If it was a smaller project or something else, then fair enough, but this is actually quite a lot of hassle. And I think putting that in and cutting that slotting edge on the length here and on the back piece, I don't think is going to give me enough strength. I would by default want to put some pocket hole screws in it anyway. The good thing is they're going to be at the bottom of back of the cabinet on the inside, and there's going to be a drawer unit here, so you won't see it at all. And as you go up, if I put pocket holes in there, which I think I probably will do, then I'm going to fill those pocket holes in with a proper piece of wood and paint them over so you won't see them. Because to be honest, I don't really need that many. The rigidity is mainly going to come from here. I'll probably only need a couple on the way out. And like I said, it's not going to have a lot of weight on it. So let's glue this in now and get it fixed. So the last thing I had to do was just hook all this together with glue. I'm not going to lie here, I put in far too much glue, which gave me a little bit of a problem because the squeeze out got a little bit sort of everywhere, and it took me quite a while to get it off, but I managed to get it off using my scraper. But they went together nice and easy, really nice fit on both sides. And on the left you can just see like a piece of MDF there. I cut a piece exactly the right size to fit across the top. These little black right angled things you can see there, they're 3D printed. I printed them quite a while ago now, but they're super useful. And again, I've tested them with my Woodworkers square, and they make an exact right angle. So I just hooked the two things together, nice and easy. And as soon as that was done, I moved on to the other side, repeated the same process. So fellow woodworkers, future Roger here again. I hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you so much for watching it. Don't forget, part 2 is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. If it's your first time at the Garage Workshop, please can I ask you to subscribe, like, comment, hit the notification bell. I've got loads of videos in my back catalogue for you to have a look at. If you are a regular subscriber, thank you so much. Also, don't forget to like and comment. I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.